Hello and welcome back. This is part 2 of thinking about political beliefs and behaviors, learning and thinking about politics. We've already covered how we become socialized or learn about politics from 2 particular sources. First, family, in terms of thinking about how hierarchies in our families growing up or in households that we were raised in, as well as our religious or non-religious affiliation also influences how we think and affiliate with the political process. These are long-term forces. These are forces that are with us from a very early age in our lives. I want to turn next, though, to another set of forces that are also equally long-term, but also ones in which we don't have a lot of choice in the matter. And these are demographic factors. So when we think about political socialization, we know that there are strong divisions in the electorate based on demographic factors. So, for example, our gender. We know as political scientists that the gender gap in elections is quite large. The difference in political views between men and women in recent elections has been astounding. Men are more likely to vote Republican. Women are much more likely to vote Democrat. And this gender gap has gone back at least to the 2000 presidential election. And there are a number of reasons why gender is an important issue in an understanding political socialization. For example, social issues touch the genders very differently. Issues like abortion, for example, or same-sex marriage. Also, economic issues as well as work issues touch the genders differently as well. And it is for these reasons and these different points of view on these very important issues that you see a gender gap emerge in elections in the United States. The second big demographic factor that is also important and at play in American presidential elections is race and ethnicity. There are some differences between African Americans and Caucasian Americans in terms of thinking about social and race-based issues, so police policy, for example, or other types of economic policies. What we do know is that when we look at how these groups are voting, we know that political differences, that Hispanics, Latinos, and African Americans have become much more democratic in recent elections, particularly Latino voters since the 2004 presidential election. In that election, George W. Bush won approximately 45% of the Hispanic vote, but in 2012, Mitt Romney won approximately 27 to 28% of the Hispanic vote. So the Hispanic vote is one of those particular important voting blocks in the United States that is growing in recent elections and has also been trending much more democratic. Finally, age and also generational gaps are very important in terms of understanding political socialization. Individuals in similar age groups are much more likely to approach politics in a very particular manner. So if you think about, for example, in any of the courses that you took in high school looking at history or looking at the greatest generation, the World War II generation, they came of age when there was not only struggle after a post-war period in the 1940s and 1950s, but also a relative period of prosperity. And this ultimately influenced attitudes about the political process that encouraged many of these individuals to become affiliated with the Democratic Party. When we look at breakdowns by particular age and generation, I've included a link here looking at how millennials, so those that are born between 1980 and approximately 2000, and how the millennials have been shaped by the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks and have become their own generation in and of themselves. So this PBS NewsHour article looks at growing up in a 9/11 world and talks specifically about how younger individuals, millennials, as I was just talking about in the previous slide, affiliate with issues like, for example, international terrorism, and how they're oriented to politics based on their experiences with September 11th. We can think of inflection points in our history in terms of the bombing of Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941, the assassination of John F. Kennedy in November of 1963, the moon landing in the summer of 1969, as well as the September 11th attacks, and understand that those particular moments changed how individuals come to understand the purpose of government, as well as what should be the goals of American political policies. So I encourage you to check out this article from the PBS NewsHour looking at growing up in the 9/11 generation. I hope that article from PBS NewsHour was helpful in giving you additional context about how age and generation are very important for understanding how we come to understand politics. When we think about the first 3 factors that we've covered with political socialization, family, religion, demographics, they're all long-term factors. They're factors that in many ways we don't have a lot of control over. And these are important for understanding how we come to affiliate with the American political process, whether or not we become a Republican or Democrat, as well as whether or not we end up voting later on in life or participating in the American political process. There are other factors as well that we'll be covering in the next set of slides, looking specifically at the media system in the United States. And it's important to understand that these are actually more short-term factors, that when we come to understand the shows that we watch on television or what we're seeing on Netflix that night, these are more short-term factors and how we come to think and know about the political process. So I look forward to seeing you in the next video when we'll be covering more short-term forces in thinking about political socialization.